right, folks, today is Wednesday, March 18th. We appreciate everybody's patience. We had a few technical difficulties. It is now 4:10, and we are calling this meeting to order of the Executive Committee of the Metro Council. The Executive Committee is comprised of all the chairs of our standing committees, in addition to the Council's elected pro tem. Okay. Generally, as we discussed at the last meeting, back into the year, moving into this year, Accenture Consulting, the scope that y'all reviewed and affirmed at our previous meeting. As well, I want to express appreciation for the committee's suggestion of a survey of all council members. That survey was sent by me. That survey was sent by Accenture. That survey was bumped by me and bumped by, so it was sent, I believe, 4 times. 25 of 40 members responded. So I had hoped for a higher response rate, but Accenture does share that it is a statistically representative sample, and then as well, we did have on offer in all the emails to members that if they did not feel that this survey was sufficient to convey everything they wanted to convey, that they could schedule additional time with Accenture for that purpose. I believe 3 members of the body availed themselves of that opportunity. So, and then in the intervening time as well, every member of staff had at least 30 minutes to speak with Accenture. Those in a leadership capacity, Brian, Ms. Hayes-Shacklet, others had a little more time, hour as needed, and then again, it very much was on offer. They weren't like at 29 minutes and 30 seconds, like, the end, right? But just so that equitably everybody got the same amount of time. We kind of launched that with staff in the start of the new year at a staff meeting to share with them the kind of proposed scope of work and how Accenture would be reaching out to schedule those interviews. And then Brian, remind me, the staff had a whole full afternoon facilitated work session with Accenture. When was that? That was in?
I believe it would have been late January, early February,
okay,
when we had the morning meeting with Accenture, yes.
Yes, and so then staff as well had an opportunity to meet with the consultants in person in some facilitated sessions. So the interviews, I think up to that point, were just by Zoom or otherwise. So as you all may recall, as well, went back and, former folks having sat in the special counsel seat, hour-long interviews, Margaret Darby, Mike Jamison, Hannah Zeitlin, again, Brian. So just trying to get a full perspective on how we operate and how we can kind of optimize within our current state, but also have a full understanding if we were have to effectuate a change in the size of the council and what the needs would be on the staff team for that purpose, right? So it has value in current state, and if we stay in current state, great. But also it's a bit of a platform background understanding so that if we have to flip that switch, we're not kind of caught back on our heels on how we're gonna evolve the various roles and needs and service delivery for the office. So what you have in front of you is an executive summary from Accenture. This is kind of a distillation of what is at present kind of in draft form. I think some 40 some odd slides, pretty dense things. And so what I had asked of the consultants was to facilitate a discussion for us today, to basically kind of distill that down. And so from a kind of big picture standpoint, there is a kind of the key recommendations are to kind of establish and align staffing with service and demand and just sort of clarify roles and capacities to think of the office in a way that is not, there's no big wall in between, the legislative functions and the administrative functions, but, whether you think of it as a team or a division, right, there's sort of the legislative services division. You see it a little bit in the office in the spatial organization at present, right? But contemplating as we work to support all the teams and make sure that we are also listening to some of the challenges that they have as far as just, what their roles are and, what's cross purposes or not. So it's both and perspective of current staff and making sure that their voices are supported and their needs are met, as well as from the perspective of the council. So you'll see off the top those key recommendations about the sort of legislative and administrative functions, adopting a standardized phased service model, and then just kind of clearly defining in this body at the start of this term, we kind of had a early phase discussion about sort of a menu of services, right? And making sure that everything on offer is clear to all 40 members, and that from a quality and sustainability standpoint, that what we do for one, we can do for all, right? And it's very clear. If I have a community meeting, I need this, can you schedule it for me? Can you do an infographic? Can you, you all in your capacities as chairs, there's an extra service level, ideally, extra level of support there for your leadership, your endeavors, your working groups, your special projects. And we want to make sure that that is also built in to the administrative services team to support the work of the committees. All right, so I'm just going to kind of keep working through the slides. If I skip over something you want to speak into or ask about, please don't hesitate. This is very informal. I'm not going to put us in the box of like literally reading every slide, but we will, I anticipate, need to meet again in April, right? So kind of you all will have time to absorb this. And before we kind of officially launch that special counsel search, I want to have everybody kind of come back together and affirm that approach, but we're not going to do that specifically today. We'll begin that discussion today. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Before that April meeting, what do you think the chances are that we could know
Correct.
what that would be? Yeah.
And so that's a little bit, like I had put together myself with Elizabeth's support, my executive assistant, like just a timeline for the special counsel search, right? We have running parallel to that, and once we discuss this packet generally, I'll also discuss the PIO position, a finance position, and so of course, from a kind of hierarchical order of like, oh, okay, our special counsel, our director, like let's do that first. As I started kind of contemplating the timeline, what were already funded and open positions with which Accenture had given some specific recommendations, like the PIO role, a little bit of rescoping, reconfiguring that. A potential role that we'll discuss here today, like a specific legislative analyst for research and fiscal analysis. It became clear to me with the session ending in April and understanding that we might get some news around that time. I didn't want to get out over our skis particular to the special counsel or any new configuration, because we've got 2 open positions right now that are already funded and affirmed by the council and in our budget. And it felt like, because those were already existing positions, we could get going on hiring those. I am having background conversations with Metro Legal and with legal search folks, and it's not that like that is completely not happening, but as far as an affirmed position description and a posting, a public posting for that, I've kind of flipped it a little bit to lead with a few of these existing positions. Respectfully, just a little bit lower hanging fruit. And so to your question then, it may be helpful to us because we may have that information by that time. I'm not gonna put us in a position of waiting for that. That timeline is still proceeding. I am only about a week behind on that sort of draft timeline. But I did feel that kind of getting this PIO and this financial position in front of that might be beneficial to the overall process, especially with the looming budget season. Is that
Yep.
answer? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so generally, again, on this sort of first item in updates, you'll see a little bit more on kind of the, the legislative-led services, administrative-led services. Again, we will come back together in April, and we can discuss at this time or at that time and in the meantime as well. So, but that's just sort of representing it graphically. Some recommendations for additional capacity and standard operating procedures that are needed in these spaces, particularly constituent services, communications. And so, administrative-led services include proclamations, ceremonial items, constituent services, community meeting logistics, communication and media services, and just, general support, letter writing, things like that. Whereas the legislative-led services, obviously that's a little more obvious. Legislative drafting, policy research, fiscal and budgetary research and analysis, and kind of situating that in that way. For consistent and predictable support, clear expectations, and a service model that can scale responsibly as council needs may evolve, right? Because I would say historically, as this office has progressed from a core, group of 5 people, right? I think, Ms. Hayes, when I started in 2015, the staff was at about 8, maybe, at that juncture. And so as council has elevated through this committee, the need for more, of this type support, that type support, we just sort of added a person, great, but we've never really kind of pressed a little bit of the pause and reset and kind of optimized that for, whose responsibility is what, and what are the optimal workflows, and who reports to whom. So that was really kind of the impetus of this work, because we were hearing both from members and from staff, right, that they needed a little more process clarity, support in the work that they were doing. Okay, so kind of, tactical next steps, sort of stabilizing those core operations, addressing some of the capacity gaps. So as you see, it's sort of that evolution from our current state, right? So optimizing for our current state, recognizing that there is a transitional state as you move to future state, right? Because you have, institutional memory, people who maybe at present have way too much on their plate, within their job, particularly in our finance area. And so in the in-between time, there may be a little duality of report and, this finance role is still doing some of this, but in time, if the goal is to move, for example, fiscal analysis, budgetary kind of support, budget process support under that legislative services division, right? You can't just flip that switch right now, right? There's an immense amount of institutional memory that needs to be transferred. So there's, it's a process, right? It's not just a switch flip and everybody, shifts in different places and takes on different responsibilities. So we want to make sure that the evolution is clear, but the evolution is also just, doable and not overwhelming to anybody, right? These are not really major shifts, to be frank. Okay, all right, so that's that slide. Okay, communication structure options. When I came into service as vice mayor, it was very clear to me from my own service and from listening to members that we needed a public information officer, somebody to do communication, somebody to do press releases. I did feel that was very much the will of the body, and that was reflected through the surveys. And so, that said, at the time, on budget was sort of an admin services position. I think the former director felt that somebody who had already been hired or was intended to be hired for that role into admin services had maybe the skill set or the capacity to serve in that regard. And so I felt like, I really pushed to have the position, but we didn't really have the opportunity to scope the position, right? And so we did get a functional job description eventually and so forth. But as you all know, that position has been open since December. And, members have needs. Mr. Huffman just had a press release put out. Budget Chair Toombs has got budget season coming up. She had a press release relative to pre-budget public comment. Like that cadence just never stops. And so to that end, you all have, and I'll transition here into item 2 there. You all got our public posting for a public information officer. We have capacity in our budget to push that salary up a little bit higher. Accenture's recommendation was if we were only going to have one person, it was kind of in that mid-level place. But that among our administrative specialists and folks on the team, they have the capacity, ability to do Canva, right? So sometimes in this space, the advice that we got is a senior communication expert has a lot of has worked in political offices, has a lot of media relations, is very senior and has certain sort of senior level expectations, but maybe not as much experience with that day-to-day kind of content creation, social media. Often that's on the younger end of the spectrum, but those younger persons might not have that overarching kind of strategic vision. So we are trying to land the plane in the middle. That can be, sometimes hard to find, I think, maybe, but I'm hopeful that in concert, Brian, myself, HR, with Accenture's recommendations based off this deliverable you see here, have posted this position last Friday. It will be open just shy of 2 weeks. It will close, of course, not tomorrow, but the Thursday after that at midnight. So if you know folks that you think are qualified or might be interested, please do make them aware. Yes, ma'am.
Vice Mayor, do you already know, I have checked in with HR, people have already submitted?
I should have thought to ask that.
Okay.
We do, our contact over there, we did let her know that we wanted to go ahead and be able to look into those applications. Obviously, we will honor the full open time, but if there is anybody who has already applied who, no matter if 10 more people applied, they look like a great candidate, we may want to go ahead and get them scheduled for an interview. So we're not just going to wait till it closes and then wait again. We want to, but fair question, I don't know. I
Okay.
didn't check that today, but we do have the ability to check it and circle back with HR. I'll do that this afternoon, well, I guess tomorrow.
Sounds good,
But
thank you.
thank you. So thank you on that. Any feedback, questions, anything on this communication structures option slide and posting? Go ahead, Pro Tem.
Thank you. I did have one question. I know you talked about how, kind of general statement, but folks on the younger end of the spectrum may have a little more social media, folks on the older end may have a little more management experience. Are we looking at, if we have a solid candidate that meets, the majority of these, but maybe they don't have 3 years in media relations or whatever the case may be, are we still kind of considering those people?
Yes, I mean, I think I often do this with young women. There's good statistics that show that often they're like, oh, well, I don't have precisely 3 years. I have 2 years and 9 months, and
They don't apply.
Right, and they don't apply. We would welcome that. I think I am interested to see what we get. Like, do we actually get people kind of in the middle, or do we get them at either? And, that may tell us something, and we'll have to maybe revisit it that time. But yes, I think it is a balance of the expectations as outlined here. So in the spirit, I mean, we did set 3 years at minimum qualifications, but that was a progressively responsible experience in that sphere, not you serve 3 years in this specific role. It's just in that related space. So I do think we want somebody who has been in a professional environment at least 3 years. But so, right, I think we wanna, again, kind of, we're not gonna speak to any person's particular age. It will be about competency and work experience and all those things, but, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. James.
Vice Mayor, I think also, in addition to,
Bless you.
qualifications for this position, I think there will need to be some education for council members on what is the appropriate use of the communications person.
Absolutely.
So, I've had a lot of requests in the past and I've hit a brick wall, like,
Yes,
oh, I
ma'am.
can't do that.
Understood. I totally concur with you, and I think that is, again, prioritizing this position now affords us the opportunity in partnership with this person to then establish, responsive to the needs of the body, what we do, when, how, elevating our capacity, ability, yes, because we are a bit of, in a bandwidth space, where, we were onboarding a new admin services person. We have had folks, move to other cities and, have some life changes, and that creates some gaps. So I acknowledge that a space that was identified as very much in need of this body, I had hoped this term we would be further along in setting some of these kind of SOPs and expectations and templates in our style manual, and so it was just sort of plug and play. You need it, you X days ahead, and it's very clear. And I think that is represented as well more generally. Menu of services, everything is very clear. What can this communications position do and will do? And that is reflected, I think, through the Accenture surveys, and we can make sure that that's reflected through this group.
And I think it's also too, there's been conflict in the past in terms of staff participating, I guess, in political activity or political speech.
Yeah.
Even though they're supporting a political body.
Yeah.
And so some clarification around that about what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the office has historically been thoughtful about, right? Like, you do want to make sure if something is going out from the Metro Council office, right, in deference to you all as chairs, but there's a standard template. If you're a chair, you go at the top of the template. It's done in this capacity, but it's not like, oh, I'm doing this thing, right, and you're in a political season, and the appearance is that you're doing it for your own purposes. And so, yes, the guidelines in this space do need to be very clear. And I think we had, I believe, Ms. Hayes, we kind of had a draft SOP for press releases. And that was sort of in a pin in it hold mode, so it has never been finalized by this group. And I acknowledge the need to do that, but as far as the transition there in that position, it seemed that if we were to wait till we got somebody in this position, that person can be a part of that formulation, and this executive committee can affirm these are the kind of stipulations, rules, guidelines that we all concur on. But yeah, I would acknowledge that has been spotty. But I would also remind the group, though, that aside from admin staff as needed historically, doing their best to put together a press release. I mean, if you look comparatively back in the historic news archives of the council office, we have put out more press releases this term than multiple terms past, right? Like we're getting kind of a cadence around whether it be our working groups or a budget public comment or a budget season. We're getting there, but we kind of started from not quite nothing, but and so I think this gives us an opportunity to be very proactive, but also in conference with interim special counsel, whomever is this, that we're making sure we've got the legal guardrails, we've got all the, the things like we need to do. But I appreciate your points, they're well made. Anything else on the PIO position recommendations? Okay. All right, so, finance, position and that, evolution here. I think, were I to have designed this slide myself, I might have put like a third, a middle box, right, from sort of current state. At present, we have a finance manager who does all the things. And that is a lot on any one particular person, so it was contemplated that that person had a second, so to speak. But that position was initially, there was a gentleman here who was at the start of the term that wasn't quite working out. He moved into a different role, then he left our office. And so that position was open for a good while, with sort of a lower salary range, and sort of conceived of as basically like a duo or a dyad, right? Of the lower salary range position reporting to the higher salary manager. That position stayed open for a really long time. Then that position was bumped up in an effort to get somebody with that experience. But what that set up a little bit was sort of more of a peer-to-peer rather than a reporting. That person who was eventually hired is no longer with the office. So that does, again, afford us the opportunity to optimize. And I was kind of reflecting on when I was in district service on the Budget and Finance Committee way back in the day, when this body affirmed through our substitute budget that we wanted another finance position for independent fiscal analysis and research. And so, interestingly, that position was held for a while by our now clerk, Austin Kyle. And there was kind of more capacity there to, delve into particular research questions, historical stuff. Could you build me a spreadsheet on this thing as I contemplate doing this other thing, right? But also doing some of the administrative functions. For various reasons as people move into other roles, and again, more things get aggregated into one person, that sort of independent fiscal analysis position kind of fell away, right? So we just kind of had a duo. That duo on finance had taken on more of the HR payroll things, is those kind of, I don't know if one would say increased in complexity, but we've had the whole Oracle migration and everything. So historically, in the sort of admin team lead, that person did all the HR and the payroll. But then as that got more kind of budgetary financially, that moved into the finance wheelhouse. So then my impression was that then the fiscal analysis piece kind of or the focus on that, it's still happening, competently happening, much appreciated. But I do think to sort of restore the original intent of the body and having that be a kind of individual standalone position, Accenture's recommendation is that that person be situated on the legislative team side of the house. Right, in the interim transition, that person will be as proposed, and I would like to get y'all's feedback on that so we can kind of affirm this approach, because this position has not been posted, and it's kind of in progress draft. I've asked Brian to give me a preliminary draft, maybe get Mr. Kyle, from his former experience, his feedback on it, Budget Chair Toombs, former Budget Chair Porterfield, maybe get your feedback on the kind of support that the Budget Chair needs through that budget process. But my proposal based on Accenture's recommendation would be that if we hire into this position, if we can get that person at the front of the budget, then that's an education in of itself. Like, you're following along with the budget season. You can sit in on the hearings, and if council has 10 questions, Ms. Calder, who is highly competent, has great institutional memory, but is also doing, Oracle transition and our office, and all the things, she might say to that person, why don't you take these 3 questions? Hey, think about this, be advised on that. The finance department has an immense amount of a training portfolio under Janine Reed's leadership for folks coming into Metro, so that training responsibility is not entirely on our existing staff. No doubt, our existing finance manager, who already has a lot on her plate. But no matter if we hire into that open finance administrator role or we hire into the legislative analyst, it will require some feedback and interaction. And I would assert that with the budget season looming, that in and of itself becomes an opportunity both for support and learning into that role, and basically reestablishing the role in the council's initial intent. So I do not have a draft job description, because I didn't want to get too far down the pike until I'd sort of socialize that with this group and get your feedback, and see, again, PIO, existing position, little bit of rescoping there and some refinement on the back end. This one is kind of fallen away a little bit, and so that's not our existing current state. So I would like the executive committee to give me some feedback and decide if that is, you believe, a good next step. So that, I'll just open it for discussion again on our finance position or positions. Feedback from our budget chair.
Well, I just wanna add one piece of context to the conversation about why we had that second opinion. That second finance position. At the time when we looked at that, as council members, as we were going through the substitute budget process, we were relying on the finance department to give us information, which we still heavily rely on the finance department.
Right.
And they do an excellent job,
Yep.
so this is no indication on the finance department. But we also wanted to make sure that the information that we were getting served the best interest of the council, and not necessarily was in support of or in opposition to the mayor's proposed budget, but that we had an independent body that can say, like, as council members, if we're saying this is what we need, we're asking for this analysis, we could get that independent analysis free from any influence of the administration, which is why the council advocated for that second finance position. So I just wanted to put a little additional context around that conversation, because that was, 6 years ago? 7 years ago now? It's been a while since we had that conversation, so I just wanted to add that context.
I think if we, kind of, why are we doing this work? Why does this office exist, right? It exists to support the legislative work of this body and this branch, and for checks and balances, right? And so I think there has been an attempt over many years to strengthen the council, whether through its committee structure, its oversight, its accountability. Instead of 14 committees, we now have 8 committees. Within those committees, you can now stand up a working group to address a specific targeted area in a time like great. So we are evolving, I think, in the best interest of Nashville Metro government generally. We're all on Team Nashville, right? But to have the council have the strength and the support that it needs, I do think as well, Ms. Porterfield, I don't know if you can speak to this, particular to, it is a very heavy lift for any budget chair. And historically, in support of that work of the budget chair, the special council director comes on side and works very intensely. I remember asking Chair Porterfield, I was like, do you have, the support that you need relative to, the other finance position? And I remember you were kind of like, wait, the other finance committee, right? Because Ms. Porterfield was working directly and felt very well supported. Great feedback on Ms. Darby's support of her through the budget process. But y'all, the budget's a big thing, but then that's a whole lot on that special counsel director. All the things through that one person, that one funnel. Yes, former budget chair, current budget chair too. Let's go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
And I think that, at least my experience has been that has how it's been in terms of the special counsel working with the budget chair, because I worked with the former special counsel.
Absolutely.
No interaction hardly ever
Yeah.
with our finance person. I think that we're having that stronger financial infrastructure would help. Is that what we've been looking at the past few budget seasons is like, how can we identify efficiencies in the budget? And we are really at a disadvantage because we don't have the bandwidth to really dig into departments' budgets. And we're the ones as a council, we cut the check,
Right.
right?
Yep.
But we have very little oversight over how that money gets spent and very little capacity to figure out how it gets spent and identify those efficiencies, which is our job, as in passing the city's budget. So having someone who could really get with the departments and with a fine tooth comb, go through how the money is spent, because there's always efficiency somewhere.
Yes.
And nobody's gonna ever wanna give up any of their money,
Yep.
or get less money.
Yep.
But it's our job to do what's best for the city, and so it would be helpful to have that infrastructure in place to help us make more informed decisions.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective, because I feel like, again, it's not that folks weren't doing a good job. Again, Ms. Porterfield's feedback on Ms. Darby's support of her through the budget was very positive. But if you could clean slate design, would you necessarily say that that person is the primary person with the budget? That's not to extricate the special counsel. They will always have engagement. The substitute budget is a legislative endeavor with the direction, but situating them more in that sort of division, taking direction from the special counsel, but very much supporting the budget chair. The research questions of any of y'all in your capacity as chair, right? And so, and being able to sort of check it against, right, well, I went to Metro Finance, or I went to this department for which my committee has oversight. Now, I have these questions. So, financial analyst on staff, can you drill down into this, right? Or can you look at this historically? Could you build me out a spreadsheet on this, right? To help me develop my argument for why I think we should or should not do this. I think we very much need that. I think that was the intent of the body in establishing that position. And so again, that's my recommendation, and I just wanted to see if y'all concurred with me on that. Anybody who, oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to plus one with, Council Lady Toombs said, as part of one of the special call working groups when I was budget chair that, Council Lady Toombs led, we were like a dog with a bone, trying to figure out everywhere, looking in the couch cushions, as we called it, trying to find savings, and I think it would be very helpful to have someone that is dedicated to doing that. I will also say, and similar to Council Lady Toombs, all of my work was with Special Counsel Darby, and then Hannah Zeitlin in her position as well, primarily with Director Special Counsel Darby, and then also secondarily with Ms. Zeitlin, not really working with the finance positions on doing that budgetary work. I also want to name that how we work through the budgetary process is also tied to the finance director at that time. And finance directors change, but our process on the council side stays the same. So I think in having that secondary position, it will help us, help strengthen us as a council. So regardless of who the finance director is, it will help us to get to the nuts and bolts of some of that information that we need to be able to best do our job from a council level.
Okay, Anybody else wanna provide feedback on that role in particular? Okay, so I'm sensing concurrence here, in conference with, interim special counsel director, Wilson, getting some feedback on that position, with our two colleagues here. The kind of the most recent person to have sat in that seat, when it was sort of in a space of maybe its original intent, who still happily is still here with us in Metro and sits with us in the chamber, Mr. Kyle, Mr. Wilson, I would suggest are good folks for feedback on that. And then as well, HR assigned to our council office, there is a team member at HR, with whom, we have talked about this and can support, Brian and myself in just getting to that kind of final, job description for posting purposes. But, you know, my goal, would be to, maybe be getting that posted by the end of next week. That's a very optimistic goal. I'm looking at Brian, he's like, woo! But I do think to the extent possible, I know that through the admin services hiring process, that you know, some folks may have been identified who might have had, who are perhaps maybe just overqualified or maybe had some of those competencies. So we can look back in that pool, potentially do some outreach there. I think perhaps even one individual had been specifically identified as kind of having some of those competencies. So I will share with you all, and just generally, our office has moved into a space where all of our classifications are comparable across HR, you know, ASO 3, ASO 4, all the classifications, all that kind of stuff. That said, though, we are like the mayor's office in that we are a political office, right? So we do not have to, nor do we follow those civil service functions, but we do like to, for you know, equity, transparency among staff and the body, what are the ranges, what are the progressions. We have adopted, I would say, Mr. Wilson, you know, kind of 85%, right, of the kind of their process, right, as to posting and so forth, but we are not specifically constrained in our office in the way, I mean, y'all might notice, like, you know, in the mayor's office, they have 30 staff and they have a whole lot of different names and titles, and you sort of track their phone list to try to ascertain kind of who's in charge of what. So we try to the extent possible, and we have had a partner, like to get this PIO position, we had a specific individual at HR who worked with us on this relative to all the other PIO similar positions in Metro. But you know, we do have the ability to kind of proceed as we see fit. And you know, again, as we progress into the next part of this discussion, I have shared with this group that it is my intent for the first time to actually post this special counsel position, again, through that HR platform. We've not historically done that because technically this body didn't have to do that, right? And so, you know, kind of both and, it gives us a little bit of flexibility, but to the extent that we can, you know, for transparency, accountability, et cetera, kind of follow the standard Metro HR process, we are endeavoring to do that with those HR partners. Okay. Any other thing on the finance structure transition slide on that position? Okay. All right. Okay. Special counsel role options. Okay, so this is just for preliminary kind of visibility and thinking on this. I think because this is so significant, because we do have the looming change, because you know, I have already spoken with legal about you know, the contract and how that may need to evolve or be looked at. Effectively, that contract has been the same since like 1976. You know, I mean, it has really just been re-upped. I think Ms. Darby changed one minor clause about, you know, legislation can't be out of conformance with the charter or state law or something like that, which was a wise thing to add. But aside from maybe one little thing, it has effectively been the same since the 70s. And so, again, I do think this has an opportunity for us to be potentially more explicit about who reports to whom and who decides what, and what is a strategic layer of decision, what is an implementation layer of decision, right? And how do we kind of approach those things so that there is no ambiguity for myself, for the special counsel, for staff, for the body. You know, sometimes we kind of have like, well, who decides on that, or who is the final? And so I think this is starting to contemplate a potential evolution, but it doesn't have to be, right? It needs to be the will of the body, and that will be effectuated by contract, and through contract, a resolution of the body, right? So there are a whole lot of layers for this decision in particular. And at present, it has just been preliminary conversations with legal relative to the contract, very kindly, a person who works professionally on legal searches, both for individuals and for firms, just to talk to that person, just, you know, pro bono about the landscape, so to speak. You know, just in background conversations, as far as any one person's desire to take on this role, I think there is really no trepidation around a special counsel that leads a legal services team, right, and has the authority to lead that team and give direction. But I do sense in conversations that I am having, the part of the job that folks don't necessarily want or have trepidation about is a little more on that director side of the house, right? Like sort of the more administrative aspect of it. That said, there may be people out there, if this body decides we want to keep proceeding as we have, we will look for that person with that job description to meet the will of the body. But I do think it is an opportune time to contemplate how we might approach it differently, because you know, we have an expired contract, we got to do a new contract, and that always affords an opportunity to deliver more clarity. I think that will be helpful to whomever sits in this role, whoever the council chooses to hire into that role. So I guess at that juncture, I would just open this slide or piece up to discussion now. Go ahead, Mr. Cash.
Yeah, a couple of things. So first is a question. So on option 1, it has director, special counsel. It also says this is closest to what we have now.
Yeah.
And then in 2 and 3, it, I guess, moves the director title to chief of staff. Is that?
No, I think it's not making that, it's sort of, is it a director, is it a chief of staff, is it, like, that the slash kind of infers.
Options.
Options,
Okay,
correct.
okay, got
It's
it.
not, no, it's not a transition in
Okay.
that regard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'm looking at 1 and 2, and, you know, 1 has kind of special counsel higher up, and 2 has chief of staff kind of higher up. And within the pros, it's kind of like, well, that, the one that has legal counsel higher up kind of focuses on legal priorities, right? And the one that's, the option 2 that has the chief of staff higher kind of focuses on operational attention to office management, right? And I don't know that those are necessarily true, that it's going to play out that way. You know, having strong people, I mean, I think you can have both of those advantages. And I kind of have a question about like the lines on option 2. So it goes, like there's, from council vice mayor, it goes kind of, the line goes kind of to director, chief of staff, which is above the others, but then over to
Oh, yeah.
special counsel. And I want to say that could be a little convoluted.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't
And-
think I had sort of clocked that
And-
there.
Like, I don't think we want any confusion, especially when it comes to the special counsel about who they report to. I'd add that, like, there's also kind of a question about, like, we've got that top, with council, vice mayor, and kind of, like, with vice mayor position, I think it makes, like, I think it's clear to it's easily understood how they're serving in an executive position, right? With a 40 or 20 or whatever number council, it's a little more unclear if we're, like, how does that play out? Is it like each person has this authority, or is it as a body, they have this authority over budgeting and policy and stuff like that, right? So I wanna say, I almost think it should be flipped to say vice mayor council, but I think if that, it should be kind of clarified what it means by saying council's at the top of the
Right, and
pyramid.
I will just kind of speak into some of the challenges, right? Like, so, I'm a countywide elected official to be the president, I'm vice mayor of Nashville, and I'm the president of this body, right? Historically, otherwise, most other cities and models, as we look at peers, often a vice mayor role is elected internal to the body, right? So I might be a district council member that gets elected by the body to serve, much like a pro tem serves, but maybe sometimes it's in a 2-year term, because everybody acknowledges 1 year, kind of, right? And so, it's a bit of an odd construct, right? And in 1963, this person was part-time, primarily just presiding over the meetings. But now the legislative complexity of everything that we're doing in the city of our size and 700,000 people, and it's a lot to be situated in a part-time role, I would say. But I think because there's always gonna be some variability at present on how someone elected to this office wants to approach it, right? So somebody might very much have another job, it is solely part-time, I want to focus on showing up and presiding at these meetings, and everything else is gonna be, kind of handled by somebody else. It's weird because, we're sort of like the mayor's office in some regard, right? Like, they have a very short transition time, they have like 30 staffed positions, they show up, they set up the structure that they do. We are not doing that, nor should we, right? Like, we have a perpetual cadence of legislation, we need continuity, we need institutional memory. But there is a little bit of, the former vice mayor didn't do that, it's not explicitly defined what they can or should, right? And so I'm really kind of trying to lean into some of this ambiguity and lack of clarity, because I think it creates unnecessary consternation, whether for myself, the special counsel director, the admin team lead / chief of staff. I think sometimes we've not had some of the harder conversations or done the harder work, because it is a little fraught and complicated sometimes. And so, to your point, Mr. Cash, I hope that this work will help us define that and make that more clear, right? Is there a level of, kind of executive, strategic decision-making, and the way Accenture, and in retrospect, I think, Brian, you'll recall, they had a slide that I really appreciated that I wish I had made sure was reflected here, but sort of like the layers of, right, like strategic decisions, right? That's what we're doing here. We're kind of sitting and thinking about, we need the fiscal analysis, we need more comm support, right? I have been told to varying degrees, that's not my job. Well, okay, but whose job is it, right? We contract for the special counsel. We sit in this seat, so like you can't necessarily have a 40-member body making decisions about what happens in an office. That's not appropriate. Nor do we want to be all up in the minutia of the office, but making sure that there are positions that are scoped appropriately to support the core functions and the legislative work of this body is absolutely my and our obligation, I believe. So, but there has been a lot of ambiguity about that, because, well, this vice mayor didn't do that, and you did this and you did that, and is that a is that Brian, is that Ms. Darby, can I ask Rosie, do I ask Vice Mayor? Like, right, like, we just need to kind of lean in and get through that, and I'm hoping Accenture's gonna help us do that.
If I could quickly add, it's new information, but I kinda like option 3, and I will say, sometimes it feels like that's closer to the model that we're using than option 1.
Yes. Okay. Ms. Evan Siegel, Chair.
So I was gonna say, option 3 is interesting. I think option 1 is obviously what we have always done, and I've no disrespect to any of the lawyers in the room, like, there's a reason that no other entity or company says our GC or our chief legal officer is gonna be our CEO. There's a CEO, right? And for most places, the attorney reports to them. This is different because what we do is so fundamentally legal. I think if you look at the state, not just here, but many other states will have, some sort of administrative office that is running their legislative branch. And within that, there is, a division of legislative services that is drafting legislation, that is doing legislative research, that is running the legal team, which is a critical but distinct function from running an organization. And so, practically speaking, whether it's option 2 or 3, I think it allows the lawyers to do what they do best and allows people who are experts in people, which lawyers, Brian's really good, so I should caveat not Brian. I'm not, okay, fine, all the lawyers in the room, I'm sure we're all great people person, but like there's one who doesn't practice that much anymore, right? Cause you've moved into more of a kind of business role with the state, right? And you're a people person, and that's the role you do now as opposed to like pure legal work, right? And that's a different role. I would not like that role, right? Conversely. But I actually think option 3 is really interesting because it is such a core function legal work. And it doesn't seem like a special counsel should necessarily report to a director, right? Nor should the legislative team have to report to the director indirectly. They should report to the lawyer, right? They have an obligation to meet their ethical duties, which is to do what their client wants them to do in an ethical way, which is very different from the duties of a manager. And so option 3 in some ways I think sort of fixes that ethical dilemma that it has always felt like we have set our lawyers up in. And it's not fair to them to do that, and it's not fair for those of us working with them to navigate that.
Appreciate that feedback.
Oh, go ahead.
Ms. James, you wanna go?
Sure. So I too like option 3. I think that the lawyer should just be doing lawyer stuff. And there's some cause if you're special counsel, you're managing the attorneys that are your team. So
Right,
there's a management aspect to it. But I think that it would kinda diffuse some of the confusion of who does what. If there's a legislative space and then an administrative space, and then a leader, chief of staff, special counsel, neither is higher than the other. I think that, where there has been consternation in the past is whether or not staff works for the council, or council works for the staff, which is how it's felt sometimes. And so, and a lot of that has to do with how our charter is written. I mean, Nashville is so dramatically different from 1963.
Yeah.
You want your charter to be a document that, stands the test of time, but we're so different, we actually do need to look at, some of the things that are in our charter and making, maybe more clearly defining some roles, more clearly defining what the vice mayor does, more clearly defining the role of the executive committee, because as you said, even if we're 20 or 40 people can't be involved in the administrative, the daily administrative work of the office.
That gives you a hard
So
time.
so there needs to be a point person. I don't think that, the voters are the boss of us. Like, there's no one person that's the boss. in terms of the council, but we do need a point person.
Yep.
That is, you know, the liaison for staff, and it makes sense that that is the vice mayor with the support of the executive committee. But that needs to be clearly defined, it's not
I
really
agree,
defined
yeah.
anywhere.
Because it has, in my view, been, I mean, I remember through my service, I was just sort of like, well, but who decide, you know, and because different folks elected into this role with unclear kind of expectations or authorities, you know, Brian and I were talking about as we progress to a decision in this space, and, you know, kind of the hiring and the contracting, I did ask him to go back and look, because everyone's gonna perceive it through the lens of, you know, how your predecessor did it, right? But there are no kind of explicit rules for this group, whether we just, you know, come to a collegial consensus because nobody is in opposition. Do we officially take a vote? You know, and so I served on the executive committee for 4 of my 8 years of service. I mean, there was, sometimes we voted on things, sometimes we didn't vote on things, sometimes, you know, so I understand that this search has taken place a whole lot of different ways. You know, in the end, it's, you know, the vice mayor signing the contract. It has come into this body, they've discussed it, then it goes to legislation, the body affirms it. But kind of establishing those clear pathways and the lines of decision authority, I think are really what I'm hoping for this work, because I don't want anybody else in this seat, right? I want it to be sustainable for whomever may sit in this seat, so that there isn't that ambiguity. Because, you know, when with the best of intentions and appropriate deference and collegiality, and it's sort of like, well, why is she doing this, or who does she think she, you know, it's difficult, and I don't want somebody to encounter that same difficulty. But I also acknowledge that if, you know, 41, to your point there, smaller body, what does that mean for, you know, so I think these are good conversations to have now. But what we will also have to contemplate is from a contracting standpoint. Historically, these have been 4-year contracts, and way back in the day, when it was like 4, 8, 10, 12, sort of these longer periods, you're gonna wanna situate this so that there's continuity across the terms, right? You don't want it changing, so I think that's important to sort of contemplate. So we have a 1.5 years left in this term. So, you know, are we gonna do another 4-year contract, or should we maybe do a 3-year, or given the looming? So there, I mean, again, we will come back in here and discuss this further, but I at least wanted us today to have a stepping off point and for you to be able to kind of share and think about it. But Chair Cap, you were next.
Yes, one quick thing, picking up what Councilmember Cash said, I think this, in the middle one, this little squiggle that goes off to the left, I think, if I understand the concept, I think that squiggle is just a mistake.
Okay, I think
If the squiggle isn't a mistake, then I don't understand the concept.
Right, no, I didn't, I had not noticed that yet. I, like Mr. Cash, I'm like, the squiggle?
I was less looking at the squiggle as the fact that council vice mayor goes to chief of staff directly and to
Yeah.
special counsel directly.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean by the,
Yeah,
I got
agree.
you, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
but
think-
my real comment is largely gonna recapitulate what Councilmember Toombs said, but maybe from a slightly different angle, which is I see the intuitive appeal of option 3, but a lot of it depends on the vice mayor. A
Yeah.
vice mayor is entirely within her rights to take a super active role in running the office, and a hypothetical future vice mayor would also be within her rights to say, I'm gonna delegate most or much of this, or, you know, there's a whole bunch of room in between. Option 3 pretty heavily relies on a super active vice mayor.
Yes.
And we would have to, I mean, we may be needing to just define that
Yeah.
in some way. But I mean, we would be, if say we end up going with option 3, whatever that looks like, we would be relying on the voters to elect a vice mayor who's gonna run the office.
Right, because that expectation would be set. I mean, awkwardly not to, but I recall in the context of the run for this office, right? Like, sort of a disparate approach to, right, like some of the things that I was suggesting that I thought might be needed or that I wanted to work on. And then the kind of the argument against that was, well, you just show up on Tuesdays and preside, right? And so I respect, I mean, again, I think that's for the voters to decide.
Yeah.
Right? It's a countywide elected office at present. And so, you know, if you think that's the right approach, then so be it. But yeah, I do think there's an awkward kind of balance between setting the role up for success, no matter, knowing that there will be potentially different people in it, but also level setting a little more explicitly what are the actual sort of duties and responsibilities. And so that creates a complexity or tension. But
Yes.
I apologize, I didn't mean to
No,
interject.
I just think that's an important thing for us to weigh as we're thinking about this, because we may say this makes sense from an office management perspective, and voters might 5, 20, 50 years from now say, well, actually, we're gonna elect a vice mayor who takes a different attitude, and then we gotta make sure if we're setting up structures that are supposed to be, endurable into the midterm future,
Right.
that's something we gotta think about. One point that I think sort of goes to that, back to the very beginning of the slides, there's a whole a bunch of support work that goes into that, I'm not saying this can't be easily defined if it's a legal or support function, but I didn't see it in the first slide, and I think it kind of goes to some of this breakdown, which is all the support at meetings, committee meetings,
Oh,
the
yeah.
printing,
Yeah.
making sure that quorum, and
Yep.
there's just innumerable hassles and tasks that go along with that. Those are probably legal, but I think that's a great example of how these things are all like intermeshed.
Indeed,
And
right. And nobody's saying like, oh, we put a big
and it's
hard
not
wall between the office.
and
There's
it's not
always
that
gonna
we
be-
can't
yeah.
define
Yeah.
who's in charge of that
Yeah.
subject, but I think it does illustrate how intertwined these are. Which is not to say that I do not favor the general drift of this, which is to clearly define administrative and legal functions. I think that makes a lot of sense, and we do need strong, independent, capability-minded legal advice, the same way that we need that for financial advice. So I certainly see the intuitive appeal of option 3. But we will have to develop what it means
Oh, yeah.
in practice.
Yep.
And, I'm really sympathetic to council staff over the years, because any 40 council members can call up at any time and say, can you draft this, can you look at that, can you post that, can you
Yes.
look at this, can you
Right.
research that?
The
And
surge
that's
of
like
work and.
40 bosses, you know what I mean? Like, that's just a really impossible, frankly,
Right.
condition under which to work.
Yes,
And
and
it's just hard to be super definite about how you do that.
And I appreciate you elevating that because, in previous terms, right, the expectation, if we just look at like the need for, social media, right, or the expectation that we would have that, right, like, and so, that is, that changes over time, and so you have to sort of staff into how things are changing and the expectations, but you also have to be very clear to sort of level set, right? Like, oh, okay, we have a template for community meetings. You can request a community meeting graphic. You can, in your capacity of chair, request, for your special budget 101 sessions in the community. Okay, in your capacity as chair, that's an extra level of service that will render there, but that's in support of your chairmanship, right? And you have to be very clear, and so there's sort of a base level of what you do for one, you do for all, then another layer on top of that. But to Chair Cap's point about particular surges, staff gets an immense surge because you all very capably, and kudos to you all, but this is a part-time role. So you're balancing all these other things, and when you come into the office on Monday or Tuesday for committee meetings or otherwise, there's a bit of a surge in the asks, right? Because you're here and you're thinking about it, right? And so for staff, right, it's this ebb and flow and surges of, right? And so we need to also make very clear, and that's why we established like the CO admin email, because that goes to Ms. Hayes in her capacity of, administrative team lead, other staff members see it, if they have the capacity for it, they can click. But, you know, I have encouraged us to use the Microsoft kind of planner tool, so it's clear who's assigned to what, because there has to be some ebb and flow balance there, because, yeah, you know, this office supports 40 council members, and we might not hear for a week, and then, oh, good night, I got 15 requests, right? And that's why we also need to level set expectations among council members. You can't show up and express, or, you know, expect, this, thing to come together in the next few minutes, right? Like, there's meeting functions happening today, there's 3 other press releases in the queue ahead of you. You know, this specialist team member has to create 3 community meeting graphics today. She cannot add your one for your meeting tomorrow, because you needed to ask for it per the SOP that members are aware of, at least 1 week ahead, right? And I think if we can start to kind of operationalize those expectations, both for council and staff, everybody's gonna be happier in the work that they do, so. Yes, I'm sorry, Chair Cash, do you mind, Ms. Bowe has?
That's fine.
Yep.
Yes,
Chair Bowe.
I'll be quick. I mean, I also was looking at all these and from what I understand and from our conversation, I also support option 3. For me, clarity is kindness. And we have just had a lot of ambiguity, and I think that this will be very helpful. And I think that, like, yes, we won't know who the future vice mayor is, but I think that's why, as we prepare and we write it, I think we need to have the ability where a person who wants to be active can be active, but a person that doesn't, it keeps the office still functioning
Absolutely.
at a respectable, level. And so I think that's what we just have to keep in mind, that some, whenever we're defining like roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I appreciate that, I like that, clarity is kindness.
Yes.
Concur, you can put that on a bumper sticker, that sounds, I believe Chair Cash was next, and back to you,
I'll
President.
be quick.
Yeah.
I think at our core, obviously, we are a legislative body, and our legislative function is supreme, right? But as, in terms of time that we spend on the job, there's an executive branch function that we are fulfilling that, for whatever reason, it's, you know, we're connecting people to the executive branch,
Yes.
meaning departments, we're asking questions, we're getting them to do things, right? And I feel pretty good if there's a transition of structure, that our legislative part is going to function similarly, maybe even better, because it might be a little easier to
Yeah.
have 20 than, but I think the part I worry about with the change is the executive branch part, because it'll be like twice as many people, and I think it'll, for each person, and I think it'll be a heavy lift in what we really need to plan for, if we need to plan for that. Does that make sense?
Speaking to that a little bit more, I'm not sure if I'm following you on
If the number changes,
the number changes,
then,
okay,
then we will,
appreciate
then
that.
each member
Okay,
will have
got it.
twice as many constituents asking them for
correct.
their
Right,
power back
everything.
on, or.
And I think too, I'm reflecting, like on the 45 slide deck, I was like, oh yeah, that slide, we should have put that in, but, you know, looking at from an operational model, you know, when you have sort of specialists with the admin team lead, as things, you know, kind of potentially shift, if that's organized, you can add more people into that, whether it's constituent services or, and that was very much, I would point y'all to this sort of, you know, last slide that is kind of the feedback from all the surveys and everything. But yes, like, I think, you know, there was a little bit of, not necessarily tension, but early on, kind of, you know, like what was the purpose of this office, right? And, you know, when this office was first, you know, stood up, as the charter contemplated that the council can hire a special counsel. But when the body under, I believe then Vice Mayor Scobie, I was like, where's that 1970 memo or whatever, you know, went to stand up this office and effectuate that, then Mayor Briley vetoed it. Council overrode it with a veto, stood up this office. And then at a certain juncture, you know, the office was kind of codified. And so I think sometimes there's sort of a regression to, well, it's only about legislation. right? Like, oh, well, we shouldn't have social media, or we shouldn't do these things, or we shouldn't, like, hello, 2026, there are certain expectations for elected officials, and I think we all know when we do the constituent service work, when you as a district council member or at large or otherwise, go down the rabbit hole to sort of solve a problem for your constituent, that's when you see a potential operational disconnect within the department. Do we need to fund into that? Is that a programmatic improvement, right? Like, the constituent services, you can compartmentalize it certainly, but ideally, it's a circle back to legislative and budgetary, right? And so the constituent service demand is super high. All the emails, all the stuff, all the outbound communication, just the expectations for people in elected office is very, very different from 1963 or 76 or 82 or whatever, right? Like, we have to kind of evolve with the times. So, Pro Tem, you had a question, or you? Ms. Vogt,
Oh, yeah,
clarity is kindness.
I remember
right?
now, thank you. I do think to Councilmember Vo's point, and somewhat I think to Councilmember Cap's point too, I think that we have to structure it in a way that gives autonomy to the vice mayor while also providing structure. Because if you have someone that wants to take it on as like a full-time thing and they want to implement a lot of changes, like that structure kind of looks away. But we don't know who's gonna win whatever election and what capacity they're gonna have and how they're going to want to. So I think, to your point, right, you campaign on, this is how I wanna operate, the other person maybe campaigns on this, and in essence, the voters are deciding. But the reality is also, every voter is not gonna hear the message, and we just don't know who's gonna win an election, and we don't know how that person's gonna operate. So I think that we have to structure it in a way that gives that structure while also leaving some flexibility for whoever is in that seat to be able to operate in the way that they see best.
Appreciate that, yeah, Chair.
And just to piggyback on that, and something Chair Toom said too, which is that, like, the vice mayor, I think it's important that the vice mayor be able to make the office what the vice mayor has said that they want to make it, but it's also important that the staff be insulated from politics, like, you could see a scenario where a vice mayor holds grudges or takes actions to, try and affect members of the body they don't agree with, and you don't want the vice mayor to be in a position where they are directly overseeing a staff in a way that could negatively affect a member's ability to do something just because they disagree with that member.
Okay.
And so I think that's also why the structure becomes really important to, again, formalize and protect everybody from whatever may be.
Great. Any other input that y'all, I mean, in the, intervening time subsequently, I think I would say if you have feedback, questions on, so as y'all know, Elizabeth Salek Kirby, my executive assistant, is kind of liaising with Accenture, just from a kind of project management, kind of keeping track of all these things. And so I guess I would say, if you have feedback on this, send that to me, CC Vice Mayor, CC Brian, like if there's anything that you think about after this meeting that you want to be kind of reflected in this work or our next steps. But I would suggest that, PIO is live. I hope to, get that situated. Next step would be to post for the financial analyst. And then we need to, I guess, can you all maybe give me some feedback on what you think is the appropriate way, whether, in partnership with Accenture, waiting for the ruling, in this special counsel piece in particular, what do you all see as the next constructive best step, right? I'm trying to do some just sort of background information gathering, right, so that we're not completely behind on it, but, you know, we're gonna have to kind of make a decision on how we wanna proceed. We respect and appreciate, Brian very much for serving in this interim capacity. Ms. Zeitlin was an interim for about 6 months. My goal had to been not have that be maybe, you know, in the 4-ish month, timeframe. But, you know, as you all know, that last contract ended December 31st, so we're kind of January, February, we're about 2.5 months in to this interim phase, and we have sort of this looming thing. So we need to move this discussion, forward. Of course, we're not gonna get out of step with, you know, this group. It will have to be affirmed via the contract with the body. We'll have to sort of socialize that with the body. You know, Accenture can assist us as far as, you know, the materials to communicate around this. I'm trying to think about, I know we need to meet again on this, but I'm thinking about in the intervening time or for that next meeting, anything that you all want to convey today to assist me in making sure that is structured in support of y'all's engagement in that decision. Because, I mean, I will be frank, I know I wanna hold space for, I wanted to kind of platform this to start this discussion, but I do think we need just sort of a specific, kind of almost like a work session on that. I don't know if that's something that we would want to do. I can come back to you with some options for what the next step is. I don't wanna put you on the spot, but I also wanna make sure it's a kind of a mutual decision about how we kind of proceed in making this decision, so that I'm meeting y'all's expectations and honoring how you think is the best way to approach it. Any more feedback on what might be next in this space? I don't know. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I can certainly garner that feedback after this meeting once you have additional thought, but anything else?
Is the decision point of like vote and or consensus of this committee?
I would like it to be. I think it needs to be, because again, in that same sort of tension, right, I am trying to honor what I understand to be the historical operational will of the body, optimizing current constructs, but as we move to things that are definitively different approaches potentially, I would want this executive committee to affirm that. Now, the special counsel has the added affirmation of, you know, I would say that, you know, this body needs to kind of vote to affirm the final form of the contract, I guess. Once that's established, that contract is appended to legislation, which the body then affirms. So there's some more kind of decision affirmation layers later. But here, again, and that's why I've asked Brian to look back, like, I honestly can't remember, like, I remember for, you know, Ms. Darby and prior, like, it, you know, my impression was, you know, the vice mayor had made that decision, right? And when, you know, and I don't even remember if we voted on it, or, we did eventually with the contract, of course, right? But again, it's been done so many different ways. I wanna make sure to honor the will of this executive group and the body. I don't wanna get too far out in front of it, but also, you know, historically, I think there's been a variety of things all the way from, as to the particular person who might fill the seat, you know, the vice mayor just calls around to people that they know and picks somebody, or there's an actual panel process. I know that happened most recent, but I've asked Brian to just sort of aggregate like how it's been done before, because there's nothing that prescriptively says, you know, this group must vote. If you all want to vote on something, I welcome that anytime. I'm trying to get us to a collegial place of unanimity on the decisions that we're making. But I welcome if anyone thinks it, I feel like this of all the things probably like needs a vote, if it's a significant change. I am comfortable in my capacity of leadership to make a suggestion or proposal based on the conversation here, but also maybe even that's a little too far in front of it, right? Like, I wanna make sure that we're all, in concurrence on how to do it.
I think, a good agenda item for the next meeting would be to drill into that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
You know, like whatever that is, I don't know that we're gonna get it decided at the next meeting, but just to start getting concrete about,
Yeah, I agree with that.
are we gonna interview as a group, are we gonna impanel a group, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a good probably item for next time.
Yeah.
I wonder, I'm not sure about this, but I wonder if it's worthwhile for us to start kicking around draft contract language
Yep,
for,
yep,
at the next meeting. I mean, cause that'll help us think also more concretely about what we're hiring for.
yeah.
So I don't know if Brian's got time to draft it or not.
No, Laura Fox has already
Okay.
been specifically assigned by the legal department, and she and
So-
I have already had a preliminary conversation.
I'm not 100% suggesting that, but I'm suggesting that we at least think about it.
Yeah.
Because it might help us be more concrete about what we're trying to do.
Yep.
If we're looking at a real job description that we
Right.
can kick around.
Right, yeah, and so, Accenture, because if y'all will recall, we, scoped it to sort of current state, understanding, what can you recommend now, but also, I'm gonna have a conversation with them as well, honoring the bifurcated scope, right, we're not flipping that switch till we know, but we also maybe need to think about a little bit of the bridging time, right, like, you can't just like hard start, flip a switch, boom, right? This has been foundational to that, but I see this a little bit in that sort of bridging space somewhat. I don't wanna wait too long to proceed, but I think we will have to, I'm gonna ask Accenture to watch this meeting, right? So they can make sure to understand the nuance of everything we've been sort of speaking into, and if they, based on that discussion, might, do you all feel like you need a deeper dive on any one of the particular options? If we're leaning a particular way, would you want one of these options vetted out a little bit additionally to affirm it? Would you want equal additional, I just wanna make sure that it's not like a switch has been flipped and we're done with phase one. There's some bridging stuff here, so we can go back to Accenture, much in the same way that I said, like, could you distill 40 slides into something for purposes of this meeting today? And on reflection, there's a few that I was like, oh man, I wish I'd added those in. For that next meeting, we can have them support that next meeting, right? Part of, and whether that's our, Ms. Fox getting us to a draft, but that draft contract would already presume a certain approach here. Maybe we write it two different ways and compare those. I appreciate that having a specific document becomes a platform for the discussion, so I appreciate that suggestion.
Yes,
but-
and I don't mean for that to pre-commit us to a certain pathway,
Okay,
but just to
okay.
be concrete about what would a pathway look like and
Okay.
how would it have to change in order to
Okay.
achieve a different pathway.
Okay, yeah.
And sorry, Vice Mayor, I have to leave in like 10 minutes,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
fine.
Anything else that anybody wants to, get onto the record or into this space relative to, the potential special counsel role evolution? Not to say that's gonna happen, this body may choose to keep it the way it is, but, anything else that you need, from me, from the consultant, for next steps on that?
One thing I just wanna lift up, and I feel like Councilmember Toombs kinda alluded to this a little bit, but I wanna say it a little more clearly.
Yeah.
And I wanna be very clear that I am speaking on behalf of, things that have been lifted up by council members.
Okay, yep.
So I'm not saying that this has been my experience,
Yeah.
I am speaking on behalf of colleagues that I've heard from. I think it is really important that our special counsel is operating in the interest of the council.
Yes.
And if council members are saying this, I want legislation to do this, like, how do we get to that yes? Like, if your legislation can't get there, then offer the alternative of like, okay, well, you can't do this, but you can do this. Special counsel Cooper, Director Cooper, was really, really good at that. And I had the pleasure of working with him, and he was just really good at that. And not all council members have had that experience, and that is something that several council members have voiced concern about. So I think that it just needs to be really clear that we need somebody that can get us to the yes.
Yeah.
Agree with that.
Couldn't agree more.
That's
Did
what
I
I
sum
meant.
that up for y'all?
Yes.
Good?
Yeah.
Everybody's
Thanks for
like,
bringing that up.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I buried it earlier when I referred to a capability mindset, but I do think that we need that.
Alrighty. Thank you, Ms. Bowe, Chair Bowe, for the reminder. Okay, colleagues, I would just ask that you take the remaining appendix and otherwise just under advisement. Any sort of feedback that you want to give on that is always very welcome. And we'll get something set for April and come back to the table on, I believe at that time, I would suggest just the sort of special counsel contracting next steps, how it's been done, what the process is gonna be specifically. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Then real quick, Ms. Vo, and if you do need to depart, on the agenda, we've got some quick updates. Brian from ITS Granicus, we had a touch base meeting with them on things everywhere from sort of Legistar to some Council Connect improvements. I'm excited that we might get to a place where we have, Brian, what is it called? That special kind of text where you can do bullets.
Rich text
Yes.
for comments in that case, and that is something that ITS and their counterparts at Granicus have been working on and are attempting to improve the Council Connect process. So where essentially when council members comment on posts, it looks like one big block of text, and
Yes.
that it is not visibly appealing. It is not great to understand. The effort is to try to make that more accessible, user-friendly, both for council members making posts and the general public that might be consuming them.
Tabs, return, bold, bullets. I think Ms. Zeitlin very kindly, I was like, could you do a thing where you tell people to like / or like we're trying to work within the constraints. But we appreciate ITS's partnership in, they had Granicus here, Brian, in October, I guess.
I believe that's.
And Granicus has a full suite, I mean, that, it seemed kind of like they cornered the civic service tech market, right? So that's Legistar, Insight, they purchased Bang the Table, which became Council Connect. Brian, was there anything else in that ITS Granicus space in particular from that handout that you wanted to elevate?
Yes, I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that on Council Connect and Insight, which is nashville.legistar.com, we now have Google Translation services
Yeah.
for our legislative language and for the website itself. Essentially, in the top right corner, you can click on a tab that'll allow different languages to be
It's like 100 languages, I
Yes,
mean, that's
yes.
huge, yeah.
So there is additional language accessibility for folks to be able to read legislation as it is filed by this office.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's pretty good. Like I looked at it in French and Italian, and I was like, all right, you know, I mean, but it literally translates the legislation, the analysis, everything gets
It's amazing.
translated,
That's
Spanish,
awesome.
Arabic, or otherwise. Yes, so that's key. The multilingual. Gov delivery, that's a little more kind of inside baseball on some of the things we're doing. Council Connect, we talked about the rich text. Anything else, Brian?
No, most of the other steps were back of house,
Yeah.
mostly regarding the improvements to the system that helps operate the meetings. I believe that's the Gov Meetings platform, but most of it was back of house.
I think, you know, one thing we've, with Accenture and our ITS partners, right, just like Metro needs an enterprise account for Canva, you know, or just like, because every office is sort of one-offing. We are using GovDelivery for everything. We have a sort of perpetual cadence of notice and things that we need to put out. It's not necessarily MailChimp Emma user-friendly. At the start of this term, you know, we shared with members if they wanted to use GovDelivery, it was free to them or whatever, but it's pretty clunky as a newsletter platform in my experience. Generally, I think, you know, Granicus is contemplating, because Granicus also now owns like GovDelivery, on any improvements there. But, you know, I had understood us to be constrained in using GovDelivery for you know, newsletters or otherwise, and then started to see, well, oh, this department uses Emma, and this department uses that, so apparently, but as you all may recall, there's a new ITS director, or kind of CIO, who has been hired. That position has been open a really good while. So I think, you know, we've expressed to ITS across a variety of things, input from members, all the kind of suites of things that we engage with, and, you know, they are sort of tracking that and making sure that our asks and things are progressing to the extent that they can. And then Brian, that clears that out. Anything that you want to say about public comment sign up? We had some feedback that there were some challenges, especially when we have a contentious matter that might be in committee, right? Because we have some constraints in the hallway, our clipboard sign up, ability of staff to monitor that or not, and so we want to kind of honor some of that frustration and look to see if we can optimize those processes. I know Chair Cash has had some good thought on that, and Pro Tem, I was going to have Mr. Wilson share some of the improvements that our staff are proposing. You all have here among your handouts, these are supposed to be watermark draft. I'm not kind of sure what happened there, but Brian, can you sort of summarize what you're proposing by way of changes?
Yes, Vice Mayor. At this point, I think there would be two small changes that could help improve this process. First, it is my impression this term that when council committees are having difficult sign up, are dealing with public comment that could be difficult or lengthy or have some complexity, we typically have a sense of that going in, and I think with that in mind, we would propose, I believe the last sheet of your handout has essentially a notice that would allow these public comment signups to move to the mezzanine, as typically happens with a typical meeting. And in those cases, a member of staff would be there to operate and to keep track of public comment signups as they would happen. Honestly, I think this is something that would have been applicable maybe 2 or 3 times this term. This is a rare occasion when it's clear that something is coming and that it's best to have a staff member help manage this process. In addition, we are also proposing updating our public comment procedures to clarify current state law on what is required for this body to do with public comment. You'll find that in the first page, the third bullet point of council meetings and the third bullet point of committee meetings. Essentially, we're making sure that with full committee meetings, state law requires that we have a public comment period that is tied to agenda items. Therefore, they have to be germane to the agenda. We have to prioritize those. In addition, there is a requirement that opposing viewpoints be fairly represented among the folks commenting. Therefore, we want to make clear both in our procedures and in the sign-up sheet that basically that as part of this, the council has to take all practical steps to follow state law.
Ryan, could you, again, I know myself, when I get the public comment, I appreciate, the reason that we close that at 6 is because Brian needs to give it a touch to make sure we're conforming to state law and balancing all those things, right? So we can't just say, ooh, sign up to 6:29, bam, here we go. But sometimes what that means is if you perceived you signed up in this order to achieve the balance, somebody further down after you. And so my suggestion has been that we try to, as cogently as possible, explain the balance and what that will mean, because people perceive potentially that we're, just picking favorites and elevating, so I think, is there new language proposed in here, Brian, that is explicit, as to how, if we say state law requires us to balance it, I think we need to be explicit in how we achieve that, right? That may mean that, right? Because basically we have to get in people's heads, where have they felt that there is a confusion or an unfairness? And then I think we need to be explicit in addressing those, whether online, on the sign-up sheet itself, right? So is the only thing that's proposed here for change the yellow highlights?
Not in that form, but it would be the third bullet points on the procedures in council meetings. In addition, there is the highlighted language that would be changed in the public comment sign-up sheet. And then the notice that is on the back page would be new.
I think to Vice Mayor's point, to that third bullet point, if we could just add like one sentence behind that to just explain, then that may mean that someone who signed up below you, someone who signed up may have to get moved ahead of you in order to balance it. I think just like one sentence to say that.
Like a hypothetical or
A sign-up list the order of sign-ups may be changed. We can workshop the language, but we can, we can, I think an extra sentence would be appropriate.
But making it really clear that we're
Yes.
only changing it to balance it and not, because
To conform
sometimes
state.
people
Yeah.
think that we're changing it to silence folk, but it should just be clear that we're only changing it to balance it, to make sure that both sides have like equal time or whatever.
Okay.
Ms. Evans Siegel?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think to conform with state law, cause it's not just to balance it, it's also if you're speaking on the agenda versus not on the
You have to
agenda.
prioritize for the
You have to
agenda, then you have to
And that
balance.
sentence is on there.
Yeah,
Yes,
but I
and-
think as far as like moving people up and down, that it can happen for both reasons.
That's
and-
correct.
And I don't know if people, I
They're
mean,
not gonna read that.
they're not gonna read that, but like I also think, I don't really know what fairly represented means. I don't think other people do. I could probably assign about 5 different meanings to it if you gave me time. But, so I don't know if it's worth saying like, which, means that opposing viewpoints or some sort of clarifying language, fairly represented may be the words in the state law, but we interpret that to mean opposing viewpoints, right?
Or you,
Ms. Beth?
yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, I would just say to add to your statement, maybe just say that they will be equally represented, however you need to workshop the language so people understand that it's the same. Like, you're gonna have 4 speakers for, 4 speakers against. And if there's only 3 against, all 3 are gonna speak. But if there's 10 against, 10 for, only whatever the equal amount is. And how that looks. And then I was gonna just add, for this, I think this is a great opportunity to then do a social media post,
Yeah.
show an example, and then
Yeah.
that's something we save and we can just keep reposting when it's time for our council meetings.
Great.
That's a great
Um,
point.
I would say also for the notice, again, if everybody's used to coming to the clipboard, I think we standardize this, we laminate it. If we, in an agenda run through, we realize highly controversial, gotta be queued up, we clip it to the clipboard. And I would suggest, Brian, the sign-up sheet, singular, for the public comment period during this committee meeting has moved. And I wouldn't call it, maybe, I wouldn't necessarily say due to, like, to sign up, please, because I don't, parks may not need that. Again, rules happens later, so I think from a staffing support, operationalizing, getting that out onto the mezzanine will more often work. So I would ask us to contemplate that this is a sheet for a single committee. There may be an evening, who knows, where we put it on 2 clipboards, but I think this should be written in a singular status because it refers to that specific committee's public comment. So I would edit it to, I've got some notes on here. But y'all concur with that it's about that singular committee? Okay. If I may, you have to depart, but Chair could you, Pro Tem does need to depart,
That's
are you okay?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, and I'll be really quick. I forgot what I was gonna say. It was.
Was it related to the posting?
It was right before that, it was support and opposition. Also, and I think this happens sometimes, and I don't know if we always have people at the clipboard to sign up, but people don't always understand support and opposition. So
Yep.
sometimes they sign up for like the wrong thing. So for example, the boring thing, if you support the legislation, you oppose the project, and people sometimes they get those things like mixed up, and then that can cause a little kerfluffle when vice mayor is now calling people up, because then it may not be balanced, and then you may have to like shift on the spot. So I think, especially for the ones that we know are gonna be like more controversial, when people are signing up, if we could make sure that we are kinda explaining to them like, what is your position, so that we can make sure to put you in the right column.
And I would just say, in support of staff, at the time of agenda run-through, Brian, just maybe a little additional guidance, right? Support of this resolution is potentially, careful language, opposition to the referred to, right? Like, just something that's a little bit of staff guidance, that doesn't kind of leave them out there hanging, especially on those controversial items, so that they can anticipate potential confusions. That's what I'm always wanting us to do, is kind of get in the head of the general public and understand where potential confusions are, and kind of cure into those, whether in printed documents, in support of staff, right? So that like we diminish the confusion in our social media. That's why we put up, what is the difference between public comment and public hearing? That's a very popular graphic that gets shared a lot. That tells us something too. That's a graphic that gets shared a lot. That's a confusion. People interchangeably refer to public comment and public hearing and think it's the same thing. It's not the same thing. So I think it is incumbent on us in our communication to make sure that we anticipate the confusions and we communicate clearly. Chair Cash?
Yes, so one of the things that we've had trouble with is in these like controversial times, and I did before I figured out that there was a confusion about that boring resolution and went through before the meeting started and was able to figure out who was for and who was against. But it took a few minutes. But one of the problems is that we've got people coming to sign up, and especially when it's not being supervised, they're like one person will show up and they know other people are coming and they will sign their names. And we can't let that happen. I think if somebody wants to speak, they have to be there in person to sign their own name. And I think there are a couple of ways, I think there are one or two ways, or both of the two, that we can do that. And it might be like language on the sign-up sheet, or I guess the sign-up sheet, that one of two ways. Like you can only sign your own name. The other is, and I gotta the state law, it seems, says that public commenters have to show proof of ID. I mean, I don't think it's a leap to interpret that to mean to get signed up on the sheet, you have to show your ID, right?
State law does not actually say that.
Right.
Council did that because we had folks from
Oh, I see.
Ohio.
Okay, I'm sorry. But it's part of the rule?
It is.
Or is it? Okay, well, still, to be able to sign up on the sheet, you have to show your proof of citizenship. I mean, and part of it is staff, I think, will cover it better if they're.
I think it just listed you had to live in the state of Tennessee,
It's
correct?
state of Tennessee, right, so residency within
Must
Tennessee.
present proof of
It's not-
Tennessee residency.
Right, not citizen, you
Or did I say
you
that?
can reside in Tennessee.
I
not
didn't mean
Tennessee.
citizenship,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
that's
I'm sorry.
okay.
I meant residency.
Understood.
So just is that the extra step that we take to make sure people are signing only their own name, is my question.
Yeah.
Can I plus one to that too?
Yes.
Because similarly to what Councilmember Cash was speaking on, there were constituents who were in line to sign up, and they were reaching out to me saying, hey, somebody that doesn't live in Tennessee is holding this spot, and then they brought in other people, and they brought in like 3 people to get in front of them. So like one person held the spot, and then they let like 3 people, because they didn't have in-state ID, so then they swapped out with like 3 people that did have in-state ID, and I just think that that is like unfair to the people that are actually like waiting. But I think that that will be, since this probably will only happen with controversial matters, I think them signing up in the mezzanine will hopefully like address that, but I just wanted to name that as well.
I appreciate, Special Counsel Wilson, go ahead.
And I'd say 3 things.
Yes.
First, while I recognize the desire to try to regulate this process, the existing procedure allows for council members or for the committee chairs or vice chairs to check IDs as part of this process for committees. That is already part of the procedure. There would be staffing issues if we had somebody in the lobby for every committee meeting running this process, checking IDs. There would be a bandwidth issue if we had someone here that was keeping up with committees, especially on nights where there are no signups or it's one person.
I don't think that is
Well, and
what folks are asking for all
I
the
would-
committees, but.
I understand. In addition, when there are situations where people are waiting to sign up before signups open, that does not, whether a line may or may not exist, that line doesn't, the process does not start until we open the sign-up process. And I would be hesitant to,
Oh my goodness, that was a very
That
loud
was me, I was just
plastic cup
leaning on an
thing.
empty plastic cup. And it gave way, sorry, Ryan.
3 years of my life.
Go ahead, Brian.
I would just be hesitant to try to manage the line before the process starts. I mean, I'm, in that case, I know folks were out here or in the midday, early afternoon, and having someone kind of, my fear would be having someone kind of to watch over them would, on a council day, just it would not be an effective use of time for our staff.
I appreciate your perspective, Brian, and I appreciate you just, sharing. I think it's important to understand what has happened before, what the concerns were around it. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can kind of cure for it or create a solution to it. And, I would say too, from an access perspective, there are things, that are, I think when the issue is particularly fraught and there's a perception of privilege or access, but, my husband used to work downtown and I had to pick up my kids from school, and might I have asked him to go get in line for me, and then, once I dropped off the kids and we did the swap, I could come and get in the public comment line. Like, I think we want to be careful not to be super prescriptive, but we also want to be aware of the perception. So I think what is proposed at this juncture, and let's just make sure everybody will affirm that, if the chair of rules or the chair of any particular committee anticipates this is going to be a highly contentious matter, I understand there's going to be a lot of people coming to talk, or staff is aware of the same, then that would potentially factor into the committee scheduling, such that, rules is always kind of happening last. And so that is typically where the non-binding resolutions in the last two that have been the most controversial, that sort of aligns up with regular public comment signing time anyway, so it's not necessarily hard to operationalize. You put the thing on the clipboard, the rules sign up moves out to the mezzanine as needed, based on, in conference with the chair, special counsel, we'll just decide, whoop, this is gonna be a controversial one. So at present, what we're gonna do is, as needed, we're gonna try to implement, or we will implement, for committees, kind of on one by one, as needed, both a clarification at the point of typical sign up, and then we will have another turn, I think, on making sure we make explicit some of these areas of confusion. But while we're aware of the sign-up swappy thing, I want to respect what Mr. Wilson is saying here. I don't think we can kind of cure for that. We might give some guidance, might want to think about that.
Can we put something on the sheet that says you are only supposed to sign for yourself?
Yes.
Yes,
We can do that.
yes, we can do that. I apologize. Thank you. That's.
And I'll add that and I think you all have let me know that if there, like both times it was controversial, you said something to me, and you or Darby said something to me. And if I know ahead of time, I will come the hour before the committee, and Vice Chair Evans said the same thing. We will come and oversee that. I don't know that we wanna just come in and hour before if we don't know, but if we know, I think we'll be there to watch over that.
Very good.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to do that. I think given that it's potentially limited specifically for your committee, aligned anyway with public comment sign up, let's try to see if we can operationalize that out at the main table without you having to do that. That said, internal to your committees anyway, right? If people are signed up, if you designate your vice chair, go ahead and give a look to that, go ahead and get the IDs instead of when your committee starts, then you're like, oh, let me check your ID, maybe try to front load that a little bit committee-wise. Yes, Chair.
Can I give my report first? Sorry, when we get there.
Respecting your time, if it is the will of the group, I welcome anybody to elevate what they want to elevate at this time, but we have already, on Ms. Toombs's birthday, I promised her a shorter meeting, and we've gone a little bit longer than intended. I don't want to thwart anybody in sharing their chair reports, but I'm going to give you the option of not giving a chair report if you need to depart or don't want to extend the meeting, but I also don't want to take away that opportunity if you have prepared one or have things you want the body to know. So with that, yes, because you need to depart,
Okay.
please do go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just want to make sure that everyone knows about the 2026 Greenway Walk Audit Series. We have started it, and I appreciate Councilmember Welsh. She is leading the Two Rivers Park Trailhead this Saturday from 9 to 10 a.m. So anyone is welcome to that. If you'd like to sign up, we have sign-ups all the way through October, so there's still plenty available.
Chair Bo, can you
Yes.
share real quick, where did the Greenway Walk, I got a little packet, a handout. Is that on social media? Where can the body share?
Yes, it's on Greenways for Nashville,
Greenways for
and then
Nashville. Okay.
I am gonna make a post and I can tag everybody as well.
Great, Greenways for Nashville, got it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then this Saturday, I just want to remind everyone that the Old Hickory Community Center is having their grand opening, and so that will be at 11 a.m. So if anyone is interested in that, please feel free and join Councilmember Eastlake. And then the biggest news is Monday, March 30th, the main library is reopening. I think that's very important. I want to make sure everyone, especially the executive committee, knows, and to support the library. They are all preparing for that.
May I speak into something just briefly in your leadership capacity? I saw folks yay, and a lot of folks kind of commenting on that post on online. Where will we park? Where will we park? Where will we park? Okay? This is a really great opportunity to remind folks that they can get to and from the downtown library on WeGo Transit. I always share my little childhood anecdote about going to the library every Saturday with my parents on the bus. I loved it. I've done some tri-transit days, both from Green Hills and the West Side, to get families together to go down for the puppet shows. Young people really do enjoy riding the bus, so it's not to say we don't have to resolve that issue and provide parking, but it also presents an opportunity sometimes when there is a constraint. Not intended, it does allow for an opportunity for people to try something different. So I would encourage you, as you are promoting Yay Downtown Library, just let people know they can get there on the bus.
I will do that.
Thank you, Chair Bev, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Other chairs, respectful of everybody's time, so if you had some stuff, maybe tailor it. Anyone else wanting, does anybody else have a time constraint from a departure standpoint that they want to convey? I'll prioritize if everybody's just if somebody's got to really, really get on out of here. Nope, okay. Ms. Evans Siegel.
Very quickly, I've had enough specially called meetings over the past 6 weeks, that I've seen everybody's faces plenty. But I think everybody knows the East Bank Committee is going to meet on the 30th of this month. We do not meet regularly. We're just talking about zoning for the East Bend, which is under Imagine East Bank, which obviously was a big countywide effort. So just want to make sure everybody knew that. I think my committee knows that, but it is open to all.
Chair, may I say something, because this applies to you and all chairs. I appreciate Chair Evan Siegel inviting Nashville DOT to give an update on the sidewalk program prioritization process. And so I want to encourage you all, when you have a department and that comes to give a special presentation to your committee, that you believe has value to the entirety of the body. There's an opportunity through support of staff and your capacity as chair, right, to then send an email to the body with a link to your committee meeting, you know, timestamp if it's before or back, right? Here's the presentation, here's the link to the slides, and then as well, just to make sure that this goes into you all have a committee SharePoint for the content of, you know, your guests or the other work. But that's a great opportunity, just to, you know, staff is happy to support that and just say, you know, appreciate the DOT coming out, sidewalk prioritization, link here. A member of staff can do that for you, but I remember that one just recently, just a day or two ago. But I know you all have similar opportunities, to share, so I just wanted to remind y'all of that, yep. Go ahead, Chair Bill.
I'll be brief, I got
Yep.
quick, three things. One, I brought codes in last meeting, and they did kind of a codes 101
Great.
of the most codes that people ask. If you wanna go back and watch government ops last meeting, I'm gonna start doing stuff like that and bringing some folks in, talk about the beer board and what the distances are and why and things like that, and try to hopefully educate some of the other folks that don't necessarily always interact with all that. Two, the mayor has hired a team to go and do a look into the district energy plant to find out what the future is gonna be. So they will be doing a survey to find out what the future is of district energy, whether we're going to expand it, sell it, throw it away, whatever, and that report is supposed to be out in July. I'll be glad to share that with you all. And then the district energy board meets once a quarter, and I have been pushing hard for a while, and it's finally gonna start being aired on the Metro Nashville network. So if you want to go watch that, it covers how much, where all the money goes, how much the fuel cost is, how much steam was used, chill water was used, where it went, any new customers. So it's a lot of really good information about what's going on with the district energy plant. And if anybody decides they wanted to, let me know. I'll be glad to take you over there.
Okay, thank you so much. Go in order here. Chair Toombs.
Budget 101 starts on Saturday, March the 28th, 1:30 p.m. at the Bordeaux Library. It is a 4-part series, March 28th, April 11th, April 18th, and April 25th. Yes, that is a heavy lift, but it's gonna get done. But the first one is March 28th at the Bordeaux Library, and it's an overview of Metro's finances. Director Reed will be there, as well as Budget Director Pratt. They're doing a session. Councilmember Coopin, Tom Turner from the Downtown Partnership, as well as Mr. Starks from the CBC, talking about the what do I call it? The economy of downtown. There will be a myth. There will be a Mythbusters segment to talk about some of the common misconceptions that people have about Metro's finances and, you know, what the actual truth is to those things. So it should be very interesting.
That's a great agenda. I mean, that's multifaceted, so appreciate
I'll do I've done a how do we get here presentation like a jillion times, so I'll be doing that. Oh, also, Assessor Will Hoyt will will have a segment on the property assessment process. And then that segues into Director Reed and Budget Director Pratt, then the economy of downtown, Mythbusters, and then Q&A.
That sounds great. Thank you, Chair. Chair Cash, anything else to share?
Just real quick, like, I've sent to, the committee members, like, a report, an annual report of the demographics and vacancies of 2 reports, of our boards and commissions. And we've had a couple of, and I wanna deep dive into that, but we've had a couple of meetings with a lot of interviews, especially 1-2 ago. And so I wanna make sure that we do that, and wanna set time to make sure we have 15 to 20 minutes at least to talk about that.
Speaking about how basically they all come in a tranche, so like the Sustainability Advisory Committee, it was just like 8 people at once, or Board of Equalization? Do you mean how
That was
they're kind of?
13. What I mean is looking at like, how we're doing demographically, like if we,
Oh,
if
I
we
apologize, I
have,
missed-
if our boards are balanced, if we have good, and it, it's not just about, race and gender, but those
I
are two
appreciate
things.
that.
It's
Diversity of
also
skill
about
sets.
age,
Yes.
zip codes, city council districts,
I apologize, I missed.
experienced and newbies, kind of looking at that, and vacancies, and there were two, I have brought up with the committee that there were two kind of, well, I brought up one of them, but two vacancy issues that I wanna talk about. One I've been talking about with the mayor's office, and another one, about NECAT that seems to have a high, turnover / vacancy rate that I wanna dig into a little bit. Especially since they've gone through a change structurally, not the board, but the.
To be with the library
Yeah,
more
yeah.
specifically, yep, okay. Thank you for that work, appreciate it. Chair Cat, you're next.
I don't have any major updates, but the Charter Vision Committee stands ready to do a lift if we have to. It's worth mentioning in that connection that we shouldn't have to, but we await the ruling of the Supreme Court, and we are hopeful that they will do the right thing.
Appreciate you, thank you for what I know is a lot of conversations that you're having and trying to, understand the ifs, ands, or buts, if this and that. That's a lot of background work, I appreciate you. Chair Huffman.
Couple things from me. So, first off, something that I took away from the last meeting was doing consent agendas ahead of time for the committee. And I've been doing that minus the last one, sorry about that. I had a good record going though, so I wanna highlight that because I think members thought it was very helpful, so
Great,
just wanna
thank
highlight
you.
that.
Yeah.
Also wanna highlight the presentations, keep doing them, they're great. I've done 4, I've got 2 more planned for April and May. Last month we had the Office of Nightlife in, they were great. This next month we've got the Department of Social Services coming in. Renee Pratt is gonna talk about just a few things that they've got going on, so keep doing those are great, and if y'all ever have opportunities, yeah.
Share those with the body afterwards,
For
just,
sure.
we had this guest,
For sure.
staff can timestamp it, yeah.
For sure,
yeah.
yes, I will do that. And then 2 working groups are going on, almost simultaneously. I wanna just give you a quick update on those. So first, the Emergency Preparedness Work Group. That is completely separate of what the mayor's office has going on, to be clear. This is much bigger than just what happened recently. This is any situation that could involve us as members of council in serving our constituents. So we're really just trying to build a checklist of resources essentially for different scenarios. This is going to be a good process, a thorough process. Right now, outside of myself, we have Chair Weiner, Evans, Frensley Webb, and Greg that are interested in serving on this. So we're really looking forward to that.
Which thing is this?
I'm sorry?
Which thing?
Oh, this is emergency preparedness work. This is the emergency preparedness. If you're interested, we'd love to have you.
I'm kinda interested too.
There you go. And see, the more the merrier, honestly, y'all, because there's gonna be a lot of balls to track down. That's something that we talked about, of course. And the more people that want in on this, yes, that sounds
I'd
great.
definitely love to be involved.
Well, and I appreciate Chair Huffman, because, with the Winter Storm Response Commission kind of tracking along, focusing on, you had an apartment fire in your district,
Yes.
or you had a flood, or, we all, when we've had to kind of, as a district council member or otherwise, get all in the midst of that, when you come out the other side of it, there's some institutional memory there that you want to be sort of transferred. So I know Chair Weiner Ms. Weiner was working on with OEM, trying to just basically, you have an apartment fire in your district, Red Cross will do this, fire will do that, here's best practices. And so I know Ms. Evans, former chair, when we had the December 2023 tornado, I kind of asked her to aggregate some of the feedback that she was getting in an effort, right? And so kind of where does that institutional memory live, and how can we kind of operationalize that? So appreciate you
Yes,
leading on that, yeah.
Thank you. And then just lastly, the interpersonal violence work group is still moving forward. We hit a blip, not a big deal. Essentially, there were a few nonprofits that didn't feel they were involved. We're hitting a pause to make sure that we're good with them. There's a meeting coming up on April 14th that I'm attending that we're gonna essentially define what the scope of this looks like and just talk about my goals for this. Director Lance invited me to attend that meeting, and we feel very good about where we're going with that. But once again, that one, the scope, we're really just trying to focus on PSAs within government buildings. We're trying to see if we can get some other partners involved as well. But I think it's a good project, and there's still a lot of interest, and of course, you know, there's unfortunately a need. So, and that's all I've got.
Okay. With that,
Can I make one
Yeah,
quick
sure.
ask, and this is mainly directly to you?
yes, ma'am.
When we have crisis, like the ice storm and stuff like that, is it possible to send something to everybody and tell them to please stop hitting reply all and getting in arguments with people, and there's including every single one of us? We're trying to keep up with what's going on, we're trying to see what's happening, and there's several people out there that will hit reply all on every single solitary thing.
Yep, we have some frequent reply allers, and I will tell you that they have been reminded by, me, by Ms. Hayes Shacklett, I have suggested to ITS that, there are certain platforms, depending on how you engage Outlook, that reply all is the first
the
default. It's the default, which I think is really a bad design situation. I don't know if that's an Outlook issue or if Metro can supersede that, but
You can change your own setting, but every time they update the thing, then it resets
Then it
it, and you
reverts.
don't know
Yeah,
that it
right.
has reverted.
well, and two.
And I don't mean to sound petty,
No,
I'm
not at
just
all.
saying that
I appreciate
No,
it.
no, well,
I
we
think
get it,
sort
yeah.
of some
I thought too.
guidance on best practice, when Keith Durbin, former council member, was head of ITS, when y'all came into service, he did what I thought was really great one-pager. It didn't maybe speak to some of those things, but I think some sort of best practice guidance on like, hey, council members, make sure you don't reply all. When Outlook updates, it will reset, double check, some of those things. I think, the Chair Huffman's work for that working group, I know it's been part of the kind of winter storm response, just sort of best practice in a crisis, because I think we want to respect everybody's autonomy as an elected official, but also there is a large diversity of standard response, the process is the process, and, post in my Facebook post and tell me if your power's out, right? And I don't wanna, I just think because sometimes there is a wide diversity of how members within their own autonomy choose to engage that, then the expectation of the community is, well, why didn't you do this, or this council member's doing that, or, right, I'm kind of being agnostic. I have my own feelings as a former district council member about kind of what is best practice. Even if you give guidance, you can't necessarily have folks follow it, even if you remind them multiple times, please don't reply all, it still happens. But I do appreciate that there is an opportunity for some additional best practice guidance that comes from a respectful place. So, thank you. Anybody else? All right, happy birthday again to Ms. Toombs. Looks like you're gonna get a lot of take-home cupcakes, so that's good. Happy birthday, and we are adjourned. Thank you. And let me make sure we are adjourned here by, I'm not sure what button I'm supposed to push.